go back, and I did not mention the toolbar, so let me switch back. I do apologize. Basically, you have these two menus that you see by default. Okay, you have the standard menu, and this one down here has to do really with the query. You can turn these on and off by going to View, and then I believe you do have the toolbars over here, and you can notice that you can simply check and uncheck that if that's what you want to do. I will leave those as default, and then keep plugging away basically. So the next main thing that I do want to talk about under SQL Server Management Studio is the registered servers. You basically have a couple of important items in here. You can group your SQL servers by functional areas. So you may have, let's say you are working in a three level environment. You have the production, stage, and development. You can definitely group these within the registered servers. You can add and remove server registration. Obviously, you can customize your connection property, things like what kind of authentication you're using, what is your default database, and even other parameters like aliases. And finally, you have the ability to export and import a server list from a source database server to a destination database server. So what does that mean? Well, let me show you. I was actually going to cover Object Explorer, but maybe let me talk about this for a couple of minutes. So I'm going to pin this down. First thing is that in here you can create another group. Okay, so let's assuming that maybe I was running a production environment. I could type this in here, and then similar concept, I could create another group called dev, and then the next thing you would do is basically you go to this one and you create a new server. Okay, that's the idea behind that. But in our case, we obviously have one server, but let's say that we do want to export. I'm assuming that let's say we had a few servers in here, and you wanted to basically move the list of servers from here to another machine. The way you would do that is right click, select tasks, and export. Okay, and this may be very beneficial if you have a lot of servers, maybe 20, 30, 40 servers, and if you don't do the export from the source and import at the target, you will have to type all these manually. Okay, and as far as I'm concerned, I am not a big fan of doing that, so this is where it's helpful. So a few items under registered servers. Moving on, this is where we will spend most of the time, and where you will actually spend most of the time in SQL Server also, but I call this the meat and potatoes part of Management Studio. You can connect to different SQL services like Database Engine, SSIS, which is the integration services, the reporting services, which is this one, and obviously the analysis services also. You have the ability to change server and database configuration settings in here, and also when you connect to the database engine, really there's a hierarchy of objects which are grouped by logical areas, and we will look at these in a minute. Some of the important tabs I would say in here are databases, security, management, and SQL Server Agent. Obviously there are other items in here as well, but I think those maybe if I had to pick the top 4, those are the ones that I would highlight just from experience. You do have customized context menus, which basically is the right click menu, which does change depending on where you are. And a couple of new features that I could think about. One is the always on high availability, which is a new product feature in SQL Server 2012, And then also another one that I could mention maybe is you could have an on-premise database, and let's say you want to deploy this to SQL Azure in the cloud. You could definitely do that from within Object Explorer. Okay, so let's switch to Management Studio, and I'm actually going to minimize this one, expand the Object Explorer, and maybe even pin it down. Okay, so let me maybe the best way to do this is really go down the list one by one and cover the items as they come down. So when you log into this, especially the database engine, here's what you see. Okay, you see the databases, security, server objects, replication, always on high availability, management, integration services, and then SQL Server agent. Okay, now like I mentioned, if you expand the databases, first you see is split in areas. You have the system databases in SQL Server, which include things like master, model, MSDB, and tempDB database. You have your database snapshots, and then you have your rest of the databases, which for us are Northwind, and these two databases have to do with SSRS, which we're not going to look at this minute. But let's go ahead and actually expand the Northwind database, because we will be spending a lot of time in this video series in that. Now within this you have the database diagram, which is the ERD. You obviously have the tables, which are, if I click here, you can see these are the tables that are available to us. Okay, we have a view, the views, which are basically virtual tables. Okay, you have synonyms, you have programmability, which is a huge area and will contain things like stored procedures, functions, and whatnot. Okay, we will definitely spend a lot of time in there. You have the service broker, storage, and security. Now this security, mind you, is different than the security down here. Okay, this security is going to be at the database level. It will include things like users, roles, schemas, and whatnot. Okay, so let me go ahead and minimize this. That gives you a good idea of what what's included in the databases. Moving on, we have security tab, which, like I mentioned, this is at the server level. This will include things like logins, server roles, credentials, audit information. So that was an overview of security. We have moving on, server objects. This is where you have things like if you were creating a backup device to do backup and restore, you can do your endpoints, link servers, and data triggers. Okay. Moving on, we have replication. You can set up basically three types of replication in SQL Server. You have transactional replication, and you have merge replication and snapshot. Okay, possibly we will look at those. This next feature is definitely an exciting one, and this is a high availability feature from Microsoft SQL Server 2012. It does lower the time for switching, and it's a combination of database mirroring and some other technology, so we will cover this at a later point. Moving on, you have the management tab. Quite a few things in here, including data tier applications, which is basically when you are trying to move code not only at the database level but also at the actual application level together as a unit. You can control your policy management, data collection, resource governor, obviously maintenance plans, things like creating indexes or updating stats, SQL Server logs, which will give you information on important activities that are happening in your SQL Server instance. Database, which is obviously a way for SQL to alert you of issues that are going on, and you have the distributed transaction coordinator, and then a legacy tab. So definitely an important tab. Like I mentioned, we will be spending a lot of time in here down the line as well. And finally, the last two things are the integration services catalogs, which is basically we will be storing our SSIS packages here, and then SQL Server agent, which is basically how you run automated jobs in SQL. You can create alerts, operators, proxies, and also monitor your error logs. So a ton of information in here. I know I went through that fairly fast, but this is all inclusive in SSMS, and this is sort of like a one-stop shop.